Hi there, and thank you for joining me on this very special edition of the Everyday Millionaire podcast. But before I get into the details of why I've decided to do this first ever special, let me first introduce my guest. And my guest today is Barry Maguire, who's a good friend of mine and who also happens to be one of the most experienced and accomplished real estate lawyers in the country. Now, Barry's a veteran real estate lawyer of more than 47 years, where his practice has been focused exclusively on real estate for 44 of those 47 years. And as a real estate investor himself, Barry began investing in real estate more than 48 years ago, which is all to say he's been doing this a long time. And over that time, he evolved to being a speaker and an educator to many real estate investor focused groups, including sharing the investing wisdom and strategies with many of the 165,000 individuals who have been a part of the various programs of the Real Estate Investment Network and our community over the past 30 years. Now, Barry is the co-founder of 97 Tips for Canadian Real Estate Investors, and he's also passionate about his coaching and his teaching, and that has all led the way for him to develop the Barry Maguire Focus Workshops, which are intensive 1 and 2 day educational workshops that challenge and empower real estate investors to take their business to the next level. So why this special edition, you may be asking? Well, the answer is quite simple, but the topic is one that Barry and I can't be more serious about, because in today's uncertain and confusing real estate market, many investors are making the mistake of stepping to the sidelines because they don't know what to do. Now, this podcast special is intended to inspire and expand your view of real estate strategies that will open the door to the possibilities that exist in a market with headwinds such as we are facing today, so that you can actually prepare and create a path to taking action. And that includes a very special offer, by the way, to join Barry and his team for the upcoming 2-day rapid cash training program being held in Edmonton on May 26th and May 27th, including a very special offer for my podcast listeners. Now, that link is in the description below, and you're going to want to take advantage of it. Now, here's the thing. If you're a real estate investor who is searching for a way to take your investing to the next level, and actually who believe that opportunities exist amongst the uncertainty and the chaos, and well, we're here to tell you that they do, Barry and I are about to share 3 proven strategies with you that are perfect to use through times just like now. Now, as you know, education is key, and opportunities present themselves when you know what is possible. You're going to hear us talk about being a problem solver in the markets that are unfolding right across the country, and it's a wave of real estate problems that need savvy investors to help solve them. And by the way, that wave is just starting to roll. Now, therein lies the opportunity for those who are equipped with the right tools and, of course, the education to know how to use those tools. So listen in as Barry and I are going to walk you through these 3 proven strategies. And with all of that said, let's get this show started. Barry Maguire, welcome, my friend, to this special edition of the Everyday Millionaire podcast. We've got a lot of things to talk about.
Well, thanks, Patrick. It's fun doing this. I love talking about real estate. And we do have a lot of things to talk about. So
let's get to work.
Let's get going.
Well, as I stated in my intro, these are certainly economic times that are ideal for the expertise that you bring to the table. As 47 years as a lawyer, real estate lawyer, and then as a coach, the creative buying strategies that I want to hit on today cover really 3 formats that I know that you're expert on, and there's others, of course, but let's talk about the opportunities that are presenting themselves and the wave of opportunities that I see coming given what's happening economically, which means we need some creative strategies. And the 3 I'm talking about today, and I would like to talk to you about today, are rent-to-own, agreements for sale, and wholesaling, not in any particular order, but where do you want to enter the conversation?
Well, I think let's talk about wholesaling first. Is wholesaling and then rent-to-own or RTO, and then agreements for sale to finish up. I think that would be the appropriate order.
Well, and just before we get started here, Barry, there's something that we have to consider, and that is, and I want it from your perspective as a lawyer. I mean, you work out of Alberta, but you're very in touch with what's going on at a national level because you actually take some of your coaching programs all the way over to Ontario. And, for example, you're doing that with agreements for sale. Well, with this whole rapid cash program or focus workshops, whichever you're going for. But here's the kind of, that's a long-winded lead into this, which is we know what's happening economically. I see opportunities starting to show up. We see increasing interest rates. We see an uncertain economic time. We see a changing world, especially when it comes to the cost of housing. And some owners, some vendors are being very motivated given those conditions. Now, are you actually seeing some of those files show up in your office or with, for example, your students who are coming across deals? Are more opportunities even starting to show up today?
They are. Lots of opportunities showing up in all markets, but different strategies work better in different markets. And so as we move through these three topics, I'll be able to give some examples of what's going on in particular markets. And it'll be very interesting for everybody watching just to see how that's going. So there are always opportunities. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world for creative strategies, and we'll talk about that as we get into the details. There are always creative strategy opportunities, and there's just going to be a few more of them if economics work out the way a lot of experts are predicting.
Perfect. Now, the reason that we're doing this special edition podcast is because you've got a program coming up. We're going to talk about that in partnership with the Real Estate Investment Network. We're going to talk about that. But really what we're seeing unfold is, I think I'm going to call it a wave of opportunities that are coming up over the next 12 or 18 months. The point is that now's the time to get that education, to prepare, sharpen your saw, whatever cliche or analogy or metaphor you want to use, get ready for not only what's here, but what is more to come, I would say.
Couldn't agree more, Patrick. Education is the key to, it's the key to learning. I mean, that's trite to say that education is the key to learning, but creative strategies are no different than anything else. You have to load your lip and, put arrows in your quiver to use some of those metaphors and analogies so that when an opportunity comes by, you can actually do something about it. You have to understand any strategy, including the three we're going to talk about today. And if you understand those strategies, you will recognize the opportunities. They will leap out of the situation and you'll go, I know what to do with that because I understand it.
Yeah, well, it's a classic example of the tool in the belt. If you've got it, you're going to use it. So let's kick it off with wholesaling. Give me I think, the other term that's often used is assigning, assignments, which is a more popular term, it seems to me, in Ontario. But listen, you're the expert. Tell me what a wholesaling is. How does that align with the term assigning deals? Give us a little bit of background on that.
All right. Wholesaling, or assignments, as it's sometimes called, is at its heart very simple to describe. So you are an investor. You want to make some money. Lots of investors start out with wholesaling. Lots of investors have no money, so they turn to wholesaling. But here's the basic summary. As a wholesaler, you go out and find an undervalued property, a below market property. You look, you check, you establish some diligence. It's under market and you know it. You get that property under contract. And if people are going, hold on here, why do sellers sell their properties for less than the market says they're worth? And the answer to that is, and we've learned this, Patrick, and you've seen it over your career, is there's no accounting for what sellers do. And there's lots of reasons why they do it. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing. But you find an undervalued property, you get that property under contract. Once you have it under contract, then you turn to your buyer's list. This is a list of people who are looking to buy properties, who don't want to do the hard work of finding properties, and who would be interested in buying your property. So you get it under contract, you turn to your buyer's list, and you tell them you have this property available. Someone on your buyer's list will say, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And you then assign, so the process is called wholesaling. How you move your rights in the contract over to your ultimate buyer is called assigning. So you have the property under contract, you assign it to your ultimate buyer for an assignment fee. You collect the check for that, and the ultimate buyer closes on the deal. We always try and set these up as a win-win so that, for example, if you find a property that's $50,000 under market value, and that happens a lot, Patrick, you might collect an assignment fee of $5,000 or $7,500 or $10,000. The ultimate buyer, if the property is really $50,000 under value, if he pays you $10,000, he's still picking up $40,000 worth of equity. So that, in a nutshell, is how it works.
Well, the real power that I'm hearing in this particular strategy as well, Barry, is that number one, if you're going into the game and you're trying to generate some income, you don't have a lot of money to, let's say, invest in real estate, but you do want to drive income in a real estate world because you're familiar with that world perhaps, or you have an interest in it. This is a way for you to drive income today. It's not a future state. It's like, okay, I've got this deal under assignment, and all of this can happen within a few short weeks, and can happen pretty quickly, so that you're actually putting money in your jeans, so that it becomes working income for you today. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. It's what we call one of the rapid cash strategies. It's rapid cash. Buy and hold. I mean, we all love buy and hold. Patrick, you and I and Donna all have lots of properties in our buy and hold portfolio. But that is a long-term project. Long-term, you're looking to pay off a mortgage in 25 years and have a clear title property and have lots of cash flow from that. That is not rapid cash.
That's not rapid.
That's not rapid. It might be great long-term, and we all do it, but it's not rapid. So yes, wholesaling / assignments is a way to generate cash right now.
So let's break this down a little bit, because I think for somebody who's listening that's maybe heard wholesaling or assignments, or maybe isn't really familiar with it, you asked the question to begin with, which is why would a vendor be, inspired or motivated to sell a property under value to somebody that they've never met before, that they don't owe any favors? And to your point, there's all sorts of circumstances. So let's give a couple of quick examples of that. It could be a death in the family. Let's say a parent passes and the family's left with this particular house, and they're going, let's get rid of this thing. I don't want to take it on. I've got kids, I've got a busy life, whatever the story. So they have this piece of property, they don't want what to do with it. And listen, they're not attached to the big number. They just want to get it off their or out of their thing to do. Is that a fair statement? That would be a scenario.
That would be a scenario. And there are lots of scenarios why sellers are motivated. There's lots of situations where sellers are distressed. It's a death in the family, loss of a job, divorce.
Divorce is a big one. Yeah.
Divorce is big. Transfer from one city to another where your company isn't picking up the tab. There's tons of circumstances where sellers have to sell, and they often have to sell quickly. And that's a key to wholesaling, is to be able to move that property quickly for the seller and get them some money outside the normal listing with a realtor sale process. So
and Barry, to your point, and I just want to step over it, is that would it be safe to say that most assignment deals in this scenario for wholesaling wouldn't be done through a realtor, or are they? Most are not?
It depends which end of the wholesaling game you are in. So, wholesalers really divide themselves up into kind of three categories. Folks who do a deal every once in a while, they know about the strategy, something comes across their desk. They're not really actively looking, but they understand it. They're doing other things in real estate, so they have the odd opportunity and they do something with it. At the other end of the spectrum, and it'll answer your question, are people who have decided that wholesaling is what they want to do, and they scale up the strategy so that they are making many offers in any particular week. And usually when you're doing that, you're using a realtor. You've ratcheted and scaled up this process so that you're really aware of what areas in a particular city that you would like to deal in, where properties are popular, where investors want to buy properties. And then you work with a realtor who understands the wholesaling strategy, and that's very important. You work with a realtor to submit a lot of offers on a lot of properties. And do you get anywhere near 100% of those? Absolutely not. I mean, you might be lucky if you got 5 to 10% of your lowball offers accepted. And that's where a good realtor can really help you. And it's a quid pro quo. It's a back scratching with a realtor. If you're looking to have a realtor show you opportunities and to write up a whole bunch of offers and to maybe help you with comps, with comparables when you need to do some research, then you have to have a relationship with a realtor that if he finds you deals that work and you actually write offers, you need to be closing on them. That's what realtors want. They want clients who close on deals, do what you say you're going to do, close on the deals. And if you happen to be a rehabber sometimes, the realtor might get the listing coming out the other way. So,
Yeah.
yes,
Go ahead.
many
Yes.
opportunities to work with a realtor in the wholesaling business, but usually more at the scale business end of it.
Understood. So this is something that, we're talking about the Rapid Cash program that we'll touch on near the end of the program, but ultimately this is the kind of thing that you teach within the program, which is to say that, yes, a realtor is important. Yes, you're probably, if you get into it in a big way, you're going to have your landing page, you're going to have a website, you're going to actually attract buyers because you're going to become known as a problem solver. You're going to be that individual that is there to support your buyer list. In other words, you're actually creating a buyer list where you have an exit because you've got a number of buyers who would be interested in specific properties. And because they're sharing with you what they're looking for, that's what you're looking for. So I don't know, is it fair to say, or is it minimizing it to say that you become a bit of a bird dog for your buyer list?
Yes. Yeah, no, you have to have a buyer list that if you think about it, somebody says, I'm going to get into wholesaling. That's a good idea. And wow, first day you find a beautiful under market property. Now you can't close on it because you have no money, but it's undervalued and it's an attractive property, and it'd be a home run. So you get it under contract, and then you go, now what? I I have no one to say to, hey, I've got this great property and you can have it. We can all make some money. So yes, you have to build that buyer's list, and you have to be able to find undervalued properties. There's probably 10 steps to go through in wholesaling. Those are the two most important kind of middle steps, which is finding the properties, but firstly having a buyer's list to move those properties to. And we teach all about that in the Rapid Cash program and in our wholesaling courses.
Now, this is a fundamental strategy that almost anybody can learn and put into place. It's far from being necessarily a full-time thing, although some take it on in that way because, to your point, some are actually wholesaling, but they're actually buying the deal and then they're renovating or doing they're rehabbing the property before they sell it again. So they get another lift in the process, different conversation. But you shared with me a while back a story about somebody in Calgary who's doing deals on the East Coast. Do you want to, I don't know, do you want to give us a little bit of a story about just how hands off this can be, or there's no limitations to geographically what you're doing?
Well, there isn't. So just generally speaking, creative strategies work all across the country. So wholesaling is well known in all the provinces. It's even well known in Quebec. Now it's a different set of rules in Quebec, and I don't teach how to do it there. But the concept of finding an undervalued property and then marketing it to somebody else for an assignment fee is well known across the country. Number one. Same with rent to own and agreements for sale. We've been plugging away at that, Patrick, as you know, for 15 years or so. And agreements for sale are having a raised profile across the country. So to get to our example, we have We have a student and a client who lives in Alberta. He works for Syncrude, but he is from New Brunswick. He's from New Brunswick. And so he learned about wholesaling at our Rapid Cash program. And when he's back visiting in New Brunswick, he's, of course, interested in real estate, and he's walking around. He's seeing boarded up properties. He's looking online to see what rentals are for other properties. So he starts banging on some doors and making some calls and finding some owners and making some offers. And he goes, you know what? We've got a lot of sellers out here who really want to get rid of their properties. So he's going, how am I going to do this from Calgary when the property is in New Brunswick? She has lots of family still living there. He's enlisted the help of his sister to be his eyes and boots on the ground in New Brunswick. And he has ratcheted up this program to the point where he has a New Brunswick lawyer, he has New Brunswick realtors. He's got his sister to be his transaction manager in New Brunswick. And he runs all that from his home in Calgary. And he is doing a ton of deals. So these work all across the country, and there are ways to do it in a different city or different province if you have the circumstance and you put in the time and the effort.
And just to share with the listeners, there's something here, Barry, that I think we should not step over. One of the cornerstones of REIN is treat your real estate investing like a business, whatever that is. And in this case, it's called wholesaling. It's called buy and hold. It's called rent to own, agreements for sale, which we're going to be talking about. But the thing is that when you treat it like a business, you are actually looking and considering, well, I need a great team of people I got to surround myself with the right team and the right people to pull it off. But there's another aspect of this is that there's a great way to generate income and the cost of entry. In other words, the money that you need to get in is, I don't want to ever say it can be zero, but it could be. We know that there's hustlers out there that can really pull it off because they work their butts off and they are very creative in how they approach things. But ultimately, the cost of entry from a dollars and cents point of view is pretty low.
I'm going to talk about that, Patrick. It was when in getting ready for this to chat with you today, wrote down, just what is wholesaling? What is wholesaling? And I wrote down 7 points, some of which we touched on. So I'm going to talk about that, including the cost of entry. And when we get to agreements for sale, we're going to talk about the cost of entry there in some very, very interesting deals. But if we come back to wholesaling, we talked about the basic side of it, that you find a property, get it under contract, assign it to somebody and collect an assignment fee. It is a simple strategy to describe it. How long did it take me to say what is wholesaling?
Yeah.
It was 25 words or so. It is simple, not easy, though, I wouldn't say. There's lots of details that you have to learn, and that's part of the educational side of it. It is, as you just pointed out, low cost. There's many a deal written with an owner where the deposit is $100 or $500 or $1,000. That is not uncommon. And that is the wholesaler's only money into the deal, is what kind of a deposit they might be able to negotiate. So that's as close to no money down as you could possibly want. What else? It's repeatable.
Oh, sorry. Go repeatable. Yes.
It's repeatable. It's once you learn how to do it and you improve your technique of both finding motivated sellers and increasing the size of your buyers list, you can just keep doing what you learned how to do and keep generating deals that you put into your pipeline. So it's repeatable. It's really a gateway to other strategies, because what you learn about finding wholesale deals are what you can apply to if you're a fix and flip. That's where you want to be. You want to be a fix and flip. You want to be a rent to own person. So a lot of what you learn about wholesaling is a gateway to the other creative strategies. Number 6 would be that wholesaling and other creative strategies are empowering, because you are often solving problems for people and creating win-win situations. And there's a karmic effect to running a business like that has an ongoing positive effect on you and the people you deal with and your ability to generate more deals out of deals you've already done if you are always being a problem solver with a win-win attitude in mind. And the last thing is, because I think we're maybe nearing the end of our time on wholesaling, is it's magic. And why would it be magic, Patrick? The short answer is, if you're an alchemist, you're always trying to turn lead into gold. Wholesaling turns nothing into profit. Nothing into profit.
So this is so interesting in terms of what you said in all of this, and I heard it all, but I think we wrap it up in terms of, really realizing that this is about coming in as a problem solver, because many people are faced with problems. They don't know where to turn. If you're somebody who's only ever owned a home, you barely understand interest rates and what a mortgage is, let alone how do I exit this particular problem that I've got, and whatever that problem might be. And we listed a few of them, but ultimately you coming in as the problem solver and creating that win-win situation, to your point, is also about defining your brand and taking a stand for who you want to be in the space called wholesaling or deal assignments. And when you take that approach, you start to see a lot of momentum that can be gained and picked up in deals showing up, because then you become a go-to guy. You become a source for other people who are seeing problems that they don't know how to solve, or it's not their area of expertise. So then you're getting referrals as well as along the way. And realtors are also looking for problem solvers that they can rely on to get certain things done. Is that a fair statement as well, Barry?
That's a wonderfully fair statement, and it's another thing that we teach at the Rapid Cash program is how to get to be the person that everyone calls, the person that everyone knows can be a problem solver, and you develop that persona and that brand over time by taking certain specific steps. And it doesn't take that long before the phones ring and people are calling you. Patrick, we know you can do deals. We know you close. We got a problem. Can you help? Yes, I can.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about our next strategy. I think on the list was, are we going rent to own, or are we talking about agreements for sale? Where do you want to go with it?
I think we'll go with rent to own as the
Next step.
strategy.
Yep. So tell us what a rent to own is. What does it mean, and why does anybody run a rent to own, Barry?
Rent to own, sometimes called lease options, is how come they all have two names? Why is that?
Yeah, get it straight.
Wholesaling assignments, rent to
Get it
own, lease
straight.
options, is a strategy that helps people who want to buy a home now. They want to be homeowners now, and for various reasons, good legitimate reasons mostly, they are not able to be a homeowner now, but they want to be. So that's what rent to own does. That urge for home ownership is a powerful urge. Worldwide, we're no different in Canada. Home ownership is something that most people aspire to. Some of our younger folks don't mind being renters, but overall, people aspire to be homeowners. So if you want to be a homeowner and you are a new Canadian, if you're a new Canadian, there are different rules if you're a new Canadian when you're going to the bank to get a mortgage. It's not as easy as if you're a resident of Canada or a citizen of Canada. If you have just started a new job, you might have a whiz-bang great job that pays you a ton of money, but when you go to the bank and they want to know your economic history and whether your income will support the mortgage payments, they want you to have had that new job for, I believe, at least a year before they will give you credit for you being the lucky guy to have a great job that pays you a bunch of money. If you've started a new business, it's kind of the same thing as if you've started a new job. I think if you started a new business, banks want 2 years of operating income before they will let you borrow in the corporate name. If you have just been involved in a divorce, here you are, you're married, you have two incomes, you're keeping the ship afloat. Now you're divorced with one income to keep your ship afloat, but you still want to buy a property. What if you are a person that has a really good income, but you haven't been much of a saver? And so that's important because, for example, if you're buying, say, here in Alberta, an average house at $400,000, and I know you guys in the lower mainland in the Golden Horseshoe are going, 400,000? Kind of a
Yeah, right.
shack are you buying for that? Um, if you get a conventional mortgage, you need to put down 20% of that $400,000 purchase price. That's $80,000 plus closing costs. If you're not a saver, accumulating 80 grand is tough for you to do. So divorce, new job, new company, new Canadian. People always look.
Let's not step over damaged credit. One of the thing about that we've seen over the years, Barry, is that in all sorts of situations, mistakes made, oversights, sticky spots in life, divorce. What happens with that credit rating can really set you behind. And so, although your job is secure, your income is decent, the bank looks at you and go, "No, you're still too high a risk. You're not ready, and we're not ready to finance that. So go get that cleaned up. Come back to me when we don't have all these kind of bad credit score things going on and marks on your bureau." I guess that's a pretty common one as well.
It is. It is a common one, and that can be something as kind of minor as missing a few bill payments. It can be as major as going through a bankruptcy or a consumer credit situation, a foreclosure. All of those have horrible effects on your credit, and repairing that credit can take an extensive amount of time. And it's kind of a continuum there. If if you're behind on some bills, if you've got too many credit cards, if you've got too many lines of credit that you access, but maybe you're not really behind, those kinds of things are fixable quicker. If you've got a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, those are harder to fix and take a lot longer, but you still want to buy a home. So there are many reasons why people who want to buy a home cannot qualify for a mortgage, and therefore they have to enter the rent to own space if home ownership is what they're looking for.
Well,
So that's
hence,
the background.
right. So that's perfect. And then to your point around this particular strategy is that you then become the problem solver. Somebody would love to buy a home. They're not in a position to either qualify for a mortgage. They may not have the down payment today. They may have a scarred credit rating that doesn't allow them to get in. They need some time. They need 2-3 years to kind of get it all together before they can buy that property. So you come in as the problem solver and say, okay, we can make that happen sooner, and then we start to put a deal together on a rent to own. And walk us through kind of the process that we may go through, kind of high level, Barry, the process that we would go through to ultimately get somebody into a property, buy a property, get somebody into it, and then an exit kind of plan around it.
Okay. So that's a good summary, Patrick, of what we're facing in the rent to own space. So it starts with fielding inquiries from people who get in touch with you because your marketing program has people phoning you to say yes, they want to buy a home. It starts with you talking to people and analyzing their situation. And really what you're looking for is to identify the problem that right now is causing them not to be able to buy a property and saying, can we fix this problem? So that's what you do first. Assuming you come to a positive answer on that scenario, then you say, okay, now let's get into the details. What is it going to take to solve your problem, and how long is it going to take to fix that? Because that determines the length of the rent to own. If it's a problem that can be solved in a year, you might set up your rent to own for 18 months just to give a little flex to be able to make sure the problem is solved. If it's a bankruptcy where people's credit needs to be spotless for, I think, 7 years, that's a much longer RTO. But first, you analyze the problem and figure out what it takes to solve it. Like if you get over that step, then you start working with, as they say, your power team. And rent to own is the classic situation where you need a lawyer who understands it, a realtor who understands it, a mortgage broker who understands it. And so your next step, once you say somebody qualifies for your program, is you send them out shopping for a home that fits the financial criteria that you've established for them. You definitely guide them for the price point that they can buy at and the area they can buy at. So they're not going to be buying a mobile home on a 2-acre parcel of land 100 clicks from the nearest town. They're not going to be buying a unique house in a strange subdivision where there's maybe only one other person in the world who will like this house besides them. You're pretty much pushing them to reasonable houses in reasonable areas that fit the dollar figure that they're going to be able to qualify on your mortgage. And that's the kind of house that you tell them to go shopping for.
So Barry, when we look at this, let's give one layer of context for listeners is understanding that rent to own from a income strategy is also very effective. This is, again, it can be very, very lucrative in terms of what you get paid up front and we'll call it the option payment, and we'll let you explain that. But ultimately, this is also a lucrative way to generate and drive income. It doesn't have to be a full-time gig, although many do it. And I think what we need to point out here is that it's a very popular strategy, and there really isn't enough expertise filling the gap. And the gap's quite big, especially given what's happening in the world today and in our economic conditions and the banking conditions today. So I want to shine a light on that it is very lucrative and there's a big demand for it, but there's a lack of expertise that for people to take it on. And it doesn't have to be a full-time kind of gig. You could do 1 or 2 deals a year and still make good money and have a very kind of successful outcome, if you will. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. Like wholesaling, it lends itself to doing a deal every once in a while, as you just described. Or if you're really on it, you can turn it into a full-time business. So it's got that ability for sure, and it certainly has the ability to be lucrative for you as the rent-to-own operator. It also has the ability for you to set these up that other investors can get involved in deals that you set up, where both you as the operator and the investor as kind of the money partner can both do extremely well on rent to own. And why is that, Patrick? I mean, how do we make this a win-win and still make a decent dollar? I mean, sometimes people think those ideas are mutually exclusive, but that is definitely not the case in rent to own. So,
well, I guess let's and let me just fill in a couple of gaps here, Barry, and I'd like you to walk us through the process a little bit. But
sure.
Ultimately, the outcome is that you're supporting somebody in getting the home that they want, and they're a part of the process of choosing the home, or most often, I guess, you want them to be. They
Yes.
become your tenant, so they're going to be more respectful of the property. As a matter of fact, they'll probably want to build some sweat equity into that property right up front. So they're going to look after it. They're going to pay their rent on time. And on top of it, you're getting a premium for rent as well as the option payment. And this is really a kind of a cool scenario from an investment point of view, because it takes a lot of risk off the table. Yes, there's a screening process and you got to make sure you get the right tenant buyer in there. But ultimately, this is a great scenario for any investor. And that's why you could attract capital partners that are going, oh, I'm only in for 2 or 3 years. This is my ROI. We see an in, we see an exit. It's not way out in the future like a buy and hold property. The exit's predetermined, and if everything goes as planned, it kind of works out that way. So that's a great scenario. But so why don't you walk us through, Barry, the kind of the process of a rent to own and how we got there. So for example, we've got a tenant buyer. There he is. Somebody or this family says, I need a home. I've got a job. My wife's got a job. 2 kids going to school. We want to live in this particular neighborhood. We need help. So what would the structure of that deal, or how would we monetize it, and what would it kind of look like?
Well, Patrick, I think you just summed it up. I think we just replay what you just said. That clip is a perfect summary of exactly how it works. But
show me the money, Barry. Come on, man. Show me the money.
All right, so we find the property. Everybody agrees this is the property to buy. To get into the deal, the rent-to-own buyer signs a lease with you like you would sign with any tenant. Just if you have properties to rent, you have a lease that you use. That's the lease that you use with your tenant buyer. You also have them sign an option agreement. The option agreement says how much the option agreement gives them the right to buy the house in a particular period of time for a particular sum of money. So the option agreement says how much option money they're going to pay up front, how much they might pay every month, what's the price they're going to pay at the end of their 2 or 3 or 4 years worth of option time. So monetarily, and how you monetize this is, so let's take our $400,000 property. That's the example we're going to use. That's the cost of this house. These folks are going to have to accumulate, if they're going to go with CMHC, most people like to go with CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. That means that they're likely going to have to get a 90% mortgage and have 10% down. I know you can do 5% CMHC mortgages, but somehow, really, when you're doing rent to own, folks have to have 10% skin in the game. So 10% of 400,000 is $40,000. That's what they have to accumulate, say 3 years out. It's going to be a 3-year rent to own. So the first question is, you would like, as the operator, as the rent to own operator, you would like to get as big a chunk of that $40,000 paid upfront as what we call initial option consideration. Why do you want that? Well, one really good reason is that the more skin people have in the game, the more likely they are to be wanting to complete their deal. If you do RTO deals for no money down, that's easy for somebody to exit after a few months saying, well, this isn't working. I got to go. But
No consequences. Yeah.
There's no consequences, no skin in the game. But if they put up $20,000 of the 40, then that's a lot harder to walk away from. So you monetarily get option money. And the option money, contrary to popular belief, does not have to go in some lawyer's trust account waiting for this deal to close in 3 years. Any option money paid, whether it's initial option money right at the beginning of the deal, or whether it's monthly option money, because remember, they have to save another $20,000 over 3 years, that money is all yours. You can take that money. It's cash flow for you right now. You can take that money and do whatever you want with it. At the end of the deal, if the people close the deal, you give them credit for the $40,000 that they paid you over 3 years. If they don't close the deal, the money is yours. So it was yours. It's yours no matter what. So you get money right now. That's number one. Number two, you can get market or better rent. Market or better rent. You always get at least market. Sometimes you can charge a little bit more, which increases your cash flow. Number three, you get mortgage pay down. So over the course of that 3 years, the mortgage is diminished by the monthly payments. And number four, you usually build an equity appreciation number into the final price that people will pay. So the price, when you write the deal, is $400,000. The price goes up by what you think reasonable equity appreciation is where you live. And that's a local number. All real estate is local, Patrick, as I've heard you say any number of times.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not get into average prices in Canada.
Let's
Patrick,
not.
let's not get into that. So what's a reasonable appreciation figure in your area? So 2%, 3%, 5%. I mean, when prices were going up 11% a month in Ontario, RTO operators were writing deals at 5% appreciation. But, that's a big number. You got to have a realistic number. And so those are the 4 ways that you generate money out of RTO deals. And they can be, at the end of 3 years, when you add up those numbers, it is totally not uncommon to have a return on investment of 20, 22, 24%. That, which if you divide with your investor, is 10, 12, 14%. And that's a low number, Patrick. I'm saying it as a low number because if you say to people, "Oh, man, you can earn 25% on this investment," they go, "Yeah, yeah. Tell me another one. Too good to be true. It must be." So we prefer to talk lower numbers, 10, 12, 14% for each investor, or sorry, for the operator and for the money partner. And that on a really a guaranteed investment, as much as any investment can be guaranteed, is fabulous return. So those are kind of how the numbers work, and they work differently if you have put an all cash deal in, or if there's a basic mortgage used to buy the property, or if there's a HELOC used to buy the property. So the numbers switch depending on which technique you use, but all of them produce great monthly cash flow and great profit.
Okay, so I'm going to be the naive student on this one, and I saw a gap, and I want you to fill the gap for me, the naive student.
Sure.
And I saw that I found this tenant buyer. We came to a conclusion on a particular property worth $400,000. We look at 10% down. They're going to need 40 grand for a down payment. They're going to give me 10, 15, 20 grand as an option that secures or gives them accountability, if you will. They've got skin in the game. So when we come time to close the deal, we've predetermined some way a number on exit, let's say, is 3 years down the road. Now, here's my question. Got it. So I've gotten the mortgage myself, and or I have a investor buyer that has got the mortgage and they've put it in their name, whatever the scenario is. And often it's an investor buyer, because if you're the kind of the person putting the deal together, you may not qualify for a mortgage anymore. You may not have the money yourself. Either way, you've got an investor involved, you've got this property on it, and you're doing your thing. You're paying premium on the rent. You're getting an option payment. Got it all. I got all that part. What
Okay.
didn't compute for me, Barry, is now in 3 years, if that property is worth $450,000 or $475,000 or whatever the number is, now my tenant buyer is going to go to the bank, and 10% is not of 400,000 anymore. It's of 450,000. Or what if it's 500,000? Now they got to come up with even more money. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, Patrick, I thought you were going to say, what happens if the property is worth less than 400?
Well, no.
In 3 years.
We're way more savvy than that. We're watching the economic fundamentals. There's been no black swan events. We're going forward.
Sure. Um, if a property is worth more than that, what price have you agreed to sell to the buyer at? It's the option that you sign right at the beginning says how much the buyer has to pay. And so let's say it's set up, okay, your price is 400 today. At year one, it'll be 400 plus a 2% appreciation. So 2% appreciation on that. So that makes it 408,000.
Yep.
At the end of year two, 2 more percent on 408,000 brings it up to say 420,000, and on to year three. So now we're at 435. So under a classic option, the buyer would have to pay $435,000 to buy that property. Now he goes to his lender who does the appraisal and says, "Oh, this is worth $500,000." What does the buyer say?
Good news.
Good news. I've got $65,000 worth of instant equity, and maybe the bank will only lend to me on the appraised value, which is probably 435,000. But I am a happy camper because I can sell this place tomorrow and collect all the money I put in plus 65 grand. So that's how that works. Now, some people say on the operator investor side of it, oh man, I'm leaving a lot on the table here. But you can set up these deals so that the price that the buyer pays is not a set appreciating price of say 2% per year, but you can set it up to say you have to pay the appraised value of the property by an AACI appraiser in 3 years. So then as the operator, you would get more. That would then lead potentially to the buyer having to come up with a bit more money. But Patrick, that's a wonderful problem to have, and nobody I've ever dealt with has had any trouble dealing with it.
Well, and the reason I asked the question is fundamentally this: is that within rapid cash programs, there's always these little nuances, these little things, these questions. And then ultimately, part of getting the education and being part of the Rapid Cash program is that you're there, the team is there because you've got a team with you that is actually supporting and actually, because they're in the trenches solving these kinds of issues on a daily basis and seeing all these nuanced conversations that can unfold. That's really what it is about, so that you go away with a lot of answers. And then, of course, there's follow up to all of that whole weekend event. So I just wanted to shine a light on it, is that, here we are. I come at you with a little bit of a problem. You just go, yeah, okay, got it. This is how we handle those situations, because there's all sorts of scenarios in the world of real estate and rent to own.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is a good point. I think it's important for people to hear that when you leave one of our events, you're not abandoned. We have a private Facebook group that any student who's ever taken one of our courses becomes a member of that group and has the ability to post to that private group. And I'll tell you, there's 500 plus people who can solve problems like crazy. I barely have to post in that group. They just take care of it themselves. Very supportive, Patrick.
I love it. Okay, so we've covered wholesaling. We are now kind of finished up with RTO. Both very, very, I guess, doable and profitable strategies. And then now, given what's happening again economically, we're looking at all of these strategies as being a problem solver. And when we see what's happening in the world today, we can't stress enough, there's going to be a lot of problems to solve. And what you should hear in all of this is there's going to be a lot of opportunities. And in order to get out in front of those opportunities and see them and actually even be part of what creates opportunities, you need the education. And that's what we're talking about today on this particular special podcast. And one of my favorite strategies, and I know one of yours and one of your students' favorite strategies, is agreements for sale, Barry. And again, a very profitable strategy, a very doable strategy. You can get in with no money down. You can be really light in all of it. So talk to me about what the heck is an agreement for sale.
I have publications called "What the heck is an agreement for sale?" That's what people say to me. What the heck is it? So an agreement for sale is at its heart, is a seller financing strategy. It's a seller financing strategy. Here's how it goes. A seller wants to sell his property, and for various reasons, it really breaks down into two areas, Patrick. Sellers who have difficulties, sellers who are in trouble. So in that category, it's kind of the same as when we were speaking about wholesaling and rent to own, is that sellers get into divorces. All of a sudden, they can't afford the house they were in that took two incomes to support because they're divorced and they only have one income each. Sellers lose their jobs. Sellers get transferred. Sellers have all kinds of problems that they cannot solve. And here's the classic no money down scenario. So we have our $400,000 house. So seller bought, paid $400,000. In this case, he got a 95% CMHC mortgage. That's 5% down. That means he got a mortgage for $380,000, which when you add CMHC fees on it is probably up to about $388, something like that. Now the market twitches. Let's just say it twitches 5% down. So his $400,000 property is now only worth $380,000 and his mortgage is $388. And his boss says, "You're moving to Calgary next week. Sorry, we don't pay your moving costs." So he's got to sell his house. A spouse says, "You know what? Sorry, we've got to get divorced." And that's going to happen soon. The boss says, "You've lost your job," and he has payments to make. So in all of those scenarios, sellers are going, "What the heck am I going to do?" And the first thing they do is they call their friendly realtor who maybe helped them buy the house. And they go, "Okay, here's what's happened to me. I've got to sell." Long silence from the realtor because he knows the numbers. Long silence. And then he goes, "Okay, sorry to have to tell you this, but your house is worth $380 right now. Your mortgage is $388. If you sell this property and pay out your mortgage, you're going to have at the minimum a 3-month interest payment penalty. And that's going to be, in your case, say $5,000. Now, you do know I'm a realtor and I get paid on commission, and that on a $400,000 sale, commission would be $16,800. 16,800 plus payout of 5,000 minimum. We're up to say $22,000, 21,800. And the realtor goes, okay. And that's not counting the fact that if the house is worth 380, we're not going to get an offer for 380. We're going to get one for 360 and settle at 370. Are you ready to stroke a check for about $22,000 in order to sell your house? Ouch. And no, the seller isn't ready to do that. So stress building for him. He's feels the burden of this giant mortgage millstone around his neck. It's more and more stressful. And so as an AFS investor, as a problem solver, as someone who's located this seller from whatever marketing you do, you come along and you say to the seller, after you've established some rapport, I'm really sorry that you're in this circumstance, but would it help you if I took over your mortgage payments, took over your taxes, took over your insurance on the property, and I will take over responsibility for all the maintenance and all the other expenses of the property? Would that work for you? What does the seller say? Yeah, that would work for me. All of a sudden, you've lifted the stress of foreclosure that's looming, where his credit will be ruined for 7 years. You've taken over the all of the angst and agony that they're facing when any of those job loss, divorce, transfer things come into the picture. Now, as an AFS buyer, you have to accomplish your usual diligence. You have to be able to see that this property works for you. It's got to work for you as an investment property because you want to add it to your portfolio, and all the maintenance on the property. If I could do that for you, would that work for you? Would that work for you? And folks, the answer to the question is almost always yes in the circumstances that we've been talking about. You've got a seller who has not been sleeping at night. He sees his credit being ruined. He's tried to sell with a realtor. He has got nowhere to go and no one to turn to. And now you have come along and solved his problem. Something else that often happens in these circumstances is that a seller does actually write you a check to take over the property. Sometimes the numbers work out that the place really is only worth $370,000 and the mortgage is $388, and you go, I can't take over a property $370 with a mortgage of $388 on it. And as much as you'd like to not have a seller have to give you a check, sometimes they do. So that is what an AFS buyer says to a seller after analysis. And so you want to know in making those offers that this is a deal that will work. So if it's a property that you want to put into your own portfolio, then your diligence should have said to you that this is going to be a positive cash flow, or at least a neutral cash flow situation for me. Occasionally people go, well, if I had bought it, I would have had to put up 40 grand or 80 grand, 80 grand if I did 20% down. So if it's negative a couple of $100 a month, let me see, a couple $100 a month, how long am I going to hold it? That's $2,400 a year. I think I might have to hold it for 5 years before the market turns around. So I have to put up 10 grand over 5 years instead of 80 grand for a deposit. So even if it's negative, depending on what your plans are for the property, it can be a home run for you. That's putting it in your own portfolio, and you have other AFS. You can exit an AFS through other creative strategies as well.
And let's not step over. So when the whole concept of an agreement for sale is that you're solving somebody else's problem. They've got to get out of a property. You're that person that's going to step in and take over the property. And the thing about this is that they've got an existing mortgage on it. Now that's really the kind of the key to all of this. So if you're in that position as an investor where you're light on a down payment and or you don't qualify for a mortgage, this is a way to actually build your portfolio. And I mean, you can incorporate all sorts of, in this case, you could be the wholesaler on these deals too, but different, more complex part of it. But you're really moving in and taking over that existing mortgage. So you're not qualifying for a mortgage. That's part of the agreement, which is to say, you're going to, Mr. Seller, you're going to actually continue to carry the mortgage in your name. The property title remains in your name. However, we have this agreement for sale that says that I'm responsible for all of these things. And I don't want to minimize the importance of making sure that's written up the right way, that the seller has actually had a lawyer's guidance, and we can talk about that briefly. But that really is the most powerful, or one of the most powerful parts of the strategy, is it not, Barry?
Yes, you've summarized it nicely. You add up between the buyer and the seller. They add up what the mortgage payment might be, what the taxes are, what the insurance are, what any other payments are, and they set up a joint bank account. The buyer deposits the amount of those payments into the account every month, and then it flows through to the seller, and his mortgage payment, tax payment, insurance payment all get made. So that is the scenario where the value of the property is near the value of the mortgage. We call that the low equity, no equity version of the AFS. You can also do an AFS where the seller is not in trouble, where a seller has a clear title property. That's a different scenario. And why would a seller who has a clear title property want to be your bank? Because really, seller financing. Well, the seller sometimes can get a premium price from a buyer. He wants $400,000 because it was worth $400,000. It's only worth $385 now in the marketplace, but it was worth $400 once, and gall darn it, he wants $400, not settling for any less. So a buyer can pay a $15,000 premium if the property still works for him. Sellers can leverage an interest rate. I mean, maybe the seller's got a mortgage of $100,000 at 1.9%. and he sells to the buyer and carries the loan of our $400,000 purchase. We put up $25,000, $375,000 loan from the seller at 3.9%. So the seller's collecting 3.9% on $375,000. He's only paying a mortgage of $100,000 at 1.9. So there's cash flow for a seller. It helps him defer taxes. It helps him get rid of a property that maybe he was renting, and he doesn't want the difficulty of renting anymore. So he can defer some taxes for up to 5 years. So there is also a whole other style of agreement for sale where the seller has maybe a ton of equity. So it works. It works on both ends of the what's the seller got into the game style of transactions.
And if an investor is listening to this, this is also a great exit strategy, or can be a great exit strategy for some properties by the investor. To your point, tax consequences and deferring taxes aside, it is just a great way to sometimes exit a property in maybe a bad market time, or where the market timing is not. It does not line up with you, but you need to get out of that deal for all the reasons. And you don't necessarily want to disturb the tenant either. It's an opportunity to have that property continue to be rented. You just want to get rid of whatever the problem is, for whatever that looks like, whatever your stress point is, and then move on. So it's a great way to exit as well.
Yeah, it's a very adaptable strategy, and it is not quite as well known across the country as wholesaling and rent to own. But it is becoming better known, and it is especially becoming better known in Ontario, where we've got 3 different sets of lawyers who want to come to our next event in Ontario to learn about agreements for sale. After we did our most recent event here in Edmonton, some Ontario attendees went back to Ontario and purchased multi-million-dollar triplexes using the agreement for sale technique, and did not put in a dime of their own money. Not a dime of their own money.
Well, how's that even possible? Like, I mean, give me a little bit more about that story, Barry. I mean,
Sure.
that's fantastic. And we know that those deals happen, but give me just a little bit more on that particular scenario.
Okay. Our student had a relationship with a pretty successful plugged-in realtor who brought a property to him and said, "Listen, this guy is a builder. He's building this triplex. There's a potential for a suite in the basement, but he's run into economic troubles, and we're in Ontario now, and the downdraft in the market has caught this builder."
Mm,
And so, for various reasons, he wants to exit this triplex that he's building. So here's what he's got. He's got a mortgage on the property of, I believe, 1.3 million. He's got a line of credit on the property for $400,000, and he's getting nibbles from buyers at 1.6, 1.65. He
mm.
thinks the property's worth about two and a half million. So realtor and student went at this a couple of different ways, and it just, it wasn't working out. The realtor goes, "Hey, I got to be paid out of this." The seller goes, "I need some money." Our student goes, "I'm putting this together for people and I want to get paid." So long story short, what they ended up doing was they set up an agreement for sale based on a price of $2.5 million. 1.3 worth of existing mortgage, $400,000 worth of
Line of credit.
existing HELOC, line of credit. They put a $200,000 second mortgage on the property, which the bank allowed because I'll just tell you why in a minute. And the seller says, on top of all of that, I will be your bank for the remaining $400,000 that's going to be due in, I think it was 4 months. Going to be due in 4 months. You go, whoa! As you know, Patrick, most agreements for sale have much longer terms than that before they mature and before you'd have to pay the seller. But here's what was going on with this property. That proposed suite in the basement became, with Doug Ford's push to have more housing. I mean, what does he want to build? 1.5 million units over the next X number of years?
Sure.
Greenbelt be damned. The suite in the basement became an approved suite. All of a sudden, that ratcheted the cash flow through the roof to the point where this property is likely worth about $3.2 million.
Wow.
So 1.3, 400 HELOC, 200 by way of a second mortgage on the house, and 400 carried by the seller is all the money that's there. That paid the realtor, that gave our client some money for setting up the deal. And essentially, he didn't have to take a penny out of his pocket. Buys for 2.5, a property that is now worth 3.2, and they're finishing up renovations now. It'll be rented for the 1st of April. And so he'll definitely be able to pay the seller within the 4-month time frame with maybe a small extension. And then, are you ready? He went and did exactly the same deal with almost exactly the same numbers with a different builder who was caught in the same circumstance.
Wow.
So
That's amazing.
that's Ontario.
But I think there's a couple things that I want to highlight here, for somebody listening to this going, wow, how do I do this? Number one, these are what you teach at your rapid cash program. These are the weekend program that you really do start to learn these things. And what's interesting about what you just shared is that, those are kind of unicorn deals perhaps, but at the end of the day, how many unicorns do you need before you've just made a lot of money? Number one. Number two, these deals would have never shown up without the context and the realization or seeing the possibility given what you learn at the program. And I think that we can't step over the one fundamental fact, which is what we've said many times so far along the way, is the stress points of whether it be builders, developers, sellers, just individuals who got themselves in trouble for whatever reason and are facing some headwinds, and taking on or keeping a mortgage is not part of their plan anymore. They need help, and that's going to escalate. Those opportunities are going to ramp up, and there's going to be many of them. And so if you're equipped with the knowledge in advance of what's coming, because Barry, you and I have both been on this planet long enough to know that this is a cycle. We've seen these cycles before, different scenario of the cause, but the ultimate cycle, we've seen it before, and we know that these opportunities are going to start to present themselves to those who are educated. There's a significant opportunity to make some really great profits in this particular marketplace.
That's too true, Patrick. Disturbance in the market brings opportunity, and we are definitely, I believe, and I think you believe, heading for more disturbance than we're experiencing right now. So there's going to be a ton of opportunities for people who understand the strategies. They'll put these techniques in place, and they'll do just fine.
Just fine. And no better person and people and team to do it with than the Rapid Cash team. And Barry will be sending out links and putting it in the description of how to register for the program and take advantage of this learning opportunity. And these are ongoing programs. We've got some coming up real soon, and those will be the ones that we're putting in the link below. But Barry, I want to say thank you for your time. You've been doing this a long time, and I can say, I've been to these programs. I've had many of our RAIN community and investors go to these programs. I've done agreements for sale. I've done a rent to owns. I've actually done wholesaling, not a ton of it, but I've done all of them, and I know they work personally. And Barry, it was because of what you shared from our stage or through your Rapid Cash programs that I was able to do that. And I want to say thanks for your time today. And for those of you who are looking at ways to profit in the upcoming and the already downturn, this is the time to get registered, and this is the time to learn. Barry, thanks very much for your time, my friend.
Always fun, Patrick. Anytime.